that's gonna leave a mark. Every time I think a video game can't elicit a new kind of feeling on me, I am inevitably surprised. I had mixed feelings before. Sometimes I liked the game that I thought I was going to hate, sometimes the reverse, but this is the first time that I'm actively frustrated by what is quite possibly a game's greatest achievement, its point. Today we are going to be talking about Reverse Collapse Codename Bakery, a turn-based tactical RPG with stealth elements created by the fine folks at Shanghai Sunborn Network Technology, creators of Girls Frontline, a gacha game that I haven't played, but assuming I didn't get any of the details wrong, is a game that is very popular among young men who really wish to get intimate with their guns. Not that we need to worry about brushing up on gun courtship conduct over here, since Codename Bakery is a completely standalone experience with a very extensive in-game encyclopedia, the kind of which you should definitely read if you want to have any idea of what's going on, as the characters in the game actually talk like normal human beings and aren't into giving long, exposition-laden speeches about things that are considered normal, everyday facts for them. So you will have to do your homework if you want to understand every little detail. The gist of it, assuming that I didn't misunderstand anything, is that in an alternate universe, relics of unknown origin were discovered on Earth. Since their technology was more advanced than anything from the time period, humanity decided to start digging them up and studying them to advance our own tech tree faster, until one of the relics started spreading collapse particles everywhere. Those particles turn people into zombie monsters. Shit goes down fast and World War III happens, and humanity essentially separates into two large nations. The Antarctic Union, who decided the best option to avoid this shit was to hole up with penguins, with yeah, I agree, and the URNC, rulers of pretty much everything else that hasn't completely collapsed into a wasteland. The story begins from the perspective of Mondo, written as Mendo for some reason, an agent of MID. And yes, Zoomers, I will give you a few seconds to laugh. MID is the main intelligence directorate of the Antarctic Union. He's essentially a secret agent on a covert operation to rescue a VIP refugee from the URNC, a young girl with the eponymous codename Bakery. Said girl's true name is G.O.T.Y. G.O.T.Y? I'm gonna say G.O.T.Y. Yeah, okay. She's a cold sniper with super regenerative abilities. When they are discovered and the mission goes tits up, both have to work together alongside occasional support from other Antarctic allies in order to find G.O.T.'s younger sister, Lige. Why can't I pronounce the names of any of the characters? Lige, I'm gonna call her, and escape the URNC. Though the stakes of this incident for humanity might be infinitely higher than both of them might think at the start. Codename Bakery's story is, to put it simply, fantastic. It is a dark and bloody spy/military thriller with fully realized characters, even if Mondo is a bit of a goody two-shoes to get us to sympathize and root for him, but hey, it worked. I too don't like leaving civilians to die in the middle of a war zone, though I understand if your opinions might differ depending on whether you'd prefer a more realistic, greedy secret agent. The story might be dark, but it's firmly on the side of idealism, on the side of surpassing unsurmountable odds through the power of determination and anime. Kinda like Metal Gear Solid.
What's with these guys? It's like one of my Japanese animes.
His ethics might not matter a lot though, since funny enough, while he is the viewpoint character at the beginning of the game, the true protagonist of the story is G.O.T.Y. And whenever they both get separated after the first chapter, it's her viewpoint that we see the story from. And she is decidedly more gritty than him. She doesn't really care who lives and who dies, so long as her and her sister gets to escape. And she doesn't care who she has to manipulate to make it happen, at least at the start of the story. If there is one thing of note that really differs the plot of Codename Bakery from its contemporaries, is that it sticks to a very deadly serious tone for 99% of its runtime. Sure, occasionally during the ready up screen, the character's chibi/super deformed versions might occasionally have a cute little skit about Mondo's cooking, but for most of the time, it's a matter of life and death as they try to deal with being severely outgunned in the middle of enemy territory. And It makes a lot of sense that the plot of the game doesn't change the tone too much since it takes place during a very short span of time, most of it taking place across 12 or so hours. There isn't really time for distractions or a beach episode when things are running this tight. Usually, I like happy moments to take a break in between the depression bouts, but the reason why I don't mind it that much here is because the plot is not really depressing or bleak. It is dark and gory, but if I had to describe it in one word, it is thrilling, which is very fitting for a spy thriller, so I recommend you to check this game out even if the plot seems like it would put you off a little bit. So the plot is great and the characters are all very well realized and it is mostly told in a visual novel style, but you might be worried that the super deformed style that they use during gameplay might ruin the tension a little bit. Well, don't worry about that. Instead, just check out this battle choreography.
嘘だ
Yeah, it goes harder than it has any right to, I know. I love the way they shift into a more realistic art style for the more punchy moments, as if shit just got so serious even reality had to make an art shift. It reminds me a bit of how comics and manga usually slowly build up to one big panel that really pops. And hey, they had to control their budget and they used every single cent of it in the best way possible to make the coolest presentation they could. And I dig that. 10 out of 10 presentation for sure. With all of those checkboxes, well, checked out, it's time for us to take a look at how the actual moment-to-moment gameplay works. On the surface, it's deceptively simple. A grid-based, turn-based tactical RPG. You do everything from movement to attacking using AP action points, and there are no special points to attack, move, or use an item. They all use the same currency of AP, so if you choose to not move during a certain turn, you can use the extra AP to score extra attacks or vice versa. It's simple to understand and simple to use, and I really like it because it really just opens up all of these tactical options on each turn. Skills run on a separate point system though, of SP, which you get as you kill enemies, and using SP does not use AP, so you can position yourself, blast your enemies, and still use any skills you want if you have enough SP all in a single turn. So far, so good. Where this stops being simple is with all of the little details that are added in layers upon layers of extra mechanics that require careful consideration. Different terrain can be harder to move through, so they cost extra AP to cross, but usually those terrains give you extra evasion, making it harder for enemies to hit you, so it's usually worth the cost to land there at the end of your turn. Speaking of which, evasion is your main way to avoid damage here. Armor does exist, but it is an extra stat that only one of your units, as well as specific special enemy units, have. As you level up your characters, evasion is the stat that goes up. You either avoid damage entirely or take it in full, with the extra painful possibility of landing a critical. All of these calculations carry as well over to weapon range, as each weapon has an optimal range in which the chance to hit increases, as well as a suboptimal range in which you can still risk taking a shot if you're willing to risk missing it. And then comes the stealth, because yes, there is a large focus on stealth here. Some enemies can see farther than others when you're in stealth, and certain areas like forests limit the vision of enemy units, so they can only detect you if you're right next to them, and vice versa as well, so enemies hidden by the fog of war can surprise you and ambush you before you know what hit you. which is where the scanner item comes in, since you can place scanners so you can see hidden enemies. Just don't let them find your scanner, since that counts as being detected as well. So how do you deal with all of these systems? How do you keep track of all of that without getting brain overload? Well, with the help of a, dare I say, pretty much perfect UI. I used just the mouse and it worked perfectly. You can easily move and control any units by simply clicking on them, and then you can move them with the game showing you the exact path your character will take in order to make the move, which is very useful to avoid the range of enemy fire or any traps that you don't want to deal with right now. You click on an enemy and the game will instantly display if you can attack them and if they are in optimal or suboptimal range, but even better, while you are planning your move, the game will show you what enemies you will be able to hit once you complete your movement, highlighting them in red or yellow in order to indicate if they're going to be in optimal or suboptimal range when you try to fire at them. If you could hit them on the next turn, but moving right now will run you out of AP on this turn, they will be highlighted in gray. And of course, there is also the classic options to see enemy range, so you can quickly see if you will be attacked. And going even further, there is an option for enemy visual range to see if you would be detected while in stealth. Enemy visual range being separated into you will definitely be detected and you will not be detected if you're hidden. If you need to activate any of these options to display these ranges, as well as other additional options not directly related to combat, like checking your map or certain special actions that you can only use in certain missions, you can quickly hit the keyboard shortcuts for each action, or simply mouse over them, as each shortcut on the screen is also a functional button. The fact that the developers were able to show all of this and still makes the UI feel as utilitarian and non-intrusive as possible is a miracle. The game needs you to process a lot of information to make each decision, and that would have been hellish without a UI this good. It helps smooth out the gameplay a lot. Outside of combat, you have what the game calls the battle preparation phase, where you can use skill points to upgrade skills, both active and passive, plus select which skills to take into battle, since you can only take 4 out of an available list of 8 active skills. The passive ones are always active, so you don't need to worry about them. There's a limited set of skills with a limited number of upgrades to each one, a very limited number, so Codename bakeries make sure every upgrade packs a punch. Sometimes they just make you more effective, but often they'll get an extra bonus on top that really makes you want to get them, and I love games that make me look forward to getting upgrades. In this phase, you can also upgrade your guns if you have the necessary pieces or customize them, which is, unfortunately, not real customization. Each gun piece is a straight up upgrade from the previous part, but since you only get a limited number of them, since you have to find them in the battlefield or kill an optional hard enemy to get them, it's mostly a choice of which gun from each character will get the upgrade first. It's prioritization, not really customization. And then finally, we reach my favorite part of the game, the item system. Here you can upgrade items as well as manufacture them using a currency named parts. You will spend most of your time here, as the amount of stuff that you can make is staggering, and the amount of stuff that you can bring into battle even more so. Items will be the difference between life and death most of the time, and there are battles that I only managed to win because I upgraded an objective critical item before it. This is also where the game's more hardcore leanings end up showing its true colors. You can only go forward in levels. You do have optional levels where you can grind up character levels up to a certain limit, depending on what chapter you are, but parts, you can't grind out parts and items, even though they might be the most critical resource in the game. Once a level is done, those are the parts you have to build up your arsenal before you finish the next one. There is a limited amount of them, so upgrading or making the wrong item can end up ruining your entire run, or at the very least, making your life insanely harder, as you have to try to scrounge up enough items to survive during the battles, since you can also use a little bit of AP to manufacture items during battles. And this is where we have to talk about the biggest problem that I have with this game. Codename Bakery is hard. Not hard for an SRPG. It is not hard because, you know, all the JRPGs are dumbed down, or these days, or whatever people talk about in JRPG circles. I don't know, I was never invited into those circles, no. But Codename Bakery is straight up hard. It is so hard that I had to tone down the difficulty to casual mode to keep playing it, and even then I barely scrape by through most of the chapters. It is rough. But when I talked at the start of the game that what is most frustrating about it is also its greatest achievement, is that this is actually very fitting for a game that requires you to rack up your neurons. After all, this is a strategy game about a small group of spies essentially trying to take on an entire army on their territory and escape. The odds not being on your favor makes things very fitting, and the difficulty is actually manageable most of the time during open combat. But where things get dicey is when it comes to stealth. You see, in stealth, if you get seen even once, if you make a single mistake, that's it. The entire base is now on your ass and you might as well reload an earlier save, of which you have a limited number of depending on difficulty, because of course you do. And I know I'm not the most hardcore gamer, I am a dirty casual who is playing on casual mode after all, so whenever I met this wall that was seemingly impossible to surmount, I wondered if I was just too stupid or maybe I was missing an obvious mechanic, like I often do. But this time, I have to sadly inform all of the people who like to make fun of me that I was unfortunately seemingly justified, as even other players have complained that the stealth difficulty is overtuned. Originally, the game was far harsher, simply throwing up a game over screen if you got seen at all doing stealth missions, but in the weeks following the release of the game, they slowly released a number of updates, easing up certain aspects of specific missions, as well as allowing you to engage in open combat if you got seen on most stealth missions. Even the ones where it doesn't really make any sense story-wise for you to be able to do so, simply because a lot of players just could not stand the stealth. Making a single mistake a game over is already harsh, but you could argue that it is fair since you have perfect knowledge of enemy positions and their routes. Thanks to the UI, it also shows all of that. And stealth involves only moving around, so you don't have to engage with healing or any other combat-based aspect of the game. It is theoretically easier to sneak around than to shoot around, so upping the ante by making it so getting caught is an instant game over sounds reasonable, but that's not how the levels are actually designed. As an example, an early stealth mission has you infiltrating a base. The only item you can use during stealth is a tranquilizer dart that puts enemies to sleep. However, there are moving spotlights around the base, so you can't just put everyone to sleep, because if a spotlight sees them, you will be detected. That's already some extra difficulty thrown in, but to make it even worse, right on the best path for one of your characters, a guard will suddenly pop up and start patrolling, causing you to lose time as you avoid him. And by the way, there is no light in the building he comes out of, there is no silhouette on the windows or any indication that that building is any particularly different from any other buildings and that he is going to show up, which is already screwed up. But to add the cherry on top, after I almost finished evading him, a sci-fi tank showed up with super sensors that could detect my characters even if they were hidden inside a special structure like a container, and I simply did not have the wiggle room to avoid the detector and the soldier, since the range of the detector was so wide. At this point, I only had two choices. I could simply get detected and dash to the exit, or redo the entire mission from scratch and try to get into a better position. And since I already had spent 30 minutes trying to find the best route to my current position in the first place, it wasn't exactly a very pleasant choice to make. I am retelling this entire story in excruciating detail to explain that I think Codename Bakery is not a harsh game, it is a sadistic one, constantly changing objectives on the fly to make your life absolutely miserable at every possible turn. And while that can be exciting in open combat, where you have the time to react and rethink your strategy, like for example in a mission where you have to guide giant zombies using towers in order to fight your enemy because their army is too big, but then the enemy cuts the powers off to the towers, that is exciting because you can rethink and you are already in open combat. But in stealth, where a single mistake can cost a lot of progress, those moments are less exciting and more just straight up frustrating. It doesn't help that the game gives you dozens of tools to heal, trap, or just straight up explode your enemies, but for stealth, as far as I noticed, the only available tool are the tranquilizer darts, and that's it, which really limits the possibility of what you can do, especially since you can't even pick up and hide the snoozing soldiers from their allies and spotlights, and they can easily find them and easily ruin your run. Your ability to successfully use stealth depends on your ability as a psychic, as you have to read the mind of the developers and find out the exact precise order of actions that will result in a victory out of 100 possible moves at any given time. Kind of like trying to find a needle in a haystack while getting shot at. The developers probably didn't expect people to find the game this frustrating. Stealth is ridiculous, but the rest of the game is no slouch in the difficulty segments either. Maybe it was intentional, since like I said, this is a spy mission against all odds in enemy territory, so having constant twists fits the bill, but it's clear people weren't supposed to be this stumped, since even after removing obligatory stealth segments and easing up on the missions, they still ended up adding a brand new difficulty mode called Casual Squared. That's right, it's not Casual Plus, it's not Casual times 2, the developers ended up squaring the casualness in order to see if people who are only invested in the story can still finish the game. Unfortunately, perhaps that was a bit of a misguided effort, as even though you can now shoot your way out of a sticky situation if you get detected, that doesn't change the fact that once you're seen, the entire enemy army is alerted and now you have 30 dudes surrounding your characters from all sides, making survival, if not hard, then at the very least really boring, as turning up the casualness does nothing but make it so that now instead of dying, you have to wait until 24 enemies miss all of their shots before it is your turn to kill about 7 of the buggers and then repeat until you can finally run away to the objective point. So even if it's not hard, it makes the game mind-numbingly boring. Look, I'm not saying this as a pejorative, this is just a characteristic of this game, but the design of the stealth missions is fundamentally sadistic. It cannot be simply fixed by making the game easier. The way the developers are trying to fix this is like trying to fix a gaping wound that is still bleeding with progressively larger band-aids. And with all of those factors piling on, eventually I decided to just stop playing the game before I reached the end. My decision though came from a completely unexpected place. It was when I checked online to see how far I was from the ending, only to find out the requirements to get the true ending. In order to get it, I would have to get an optional hidden document that exists as an extra collectible in almost every single mission of the game. And if I didn't get it the first time, I would have to replay each mission to get them, and I'm very sorry. I'm about to do something that I rarely do, but life is short and I am lazy. There's no way I'm repeating the most grueling missions that I've barely survived through the first time around in casual difficulty, and there's no way I will set the game to casual squared just to do a pile of boring busy work in order to get the true ending. I already have, as I write the script, 30 hours of playtime, and I was thinking I was getting close to the true ending, but apparently the developers weren't joking when they said this game could end up taking 100 hours of time. Once again, I'm sorry, and you guys should feel free to take away my hardcore gamer card, but I'll have to check out here. Maybe I'm just not in the right headspace for this right now, and so I might come back to it later, but for now, I'll have to just mark this as unfinished. At the end of the day though, I will still wholeheartedly recommend this game. I know that with all of what I said, you might think that this game might be unbalanced or too unfair, but honestly, now that you've seen this review to the very end, you're ready with the knowledge of how this game works, and you know that you have to get each of those goddamn files before you proceed. You're honestly better equipped to tackle Codename Bakery than I was when I started it. Thing is, this game is truly special. It is well written, it looks good, and it plays wonderfully when it is not screwing you over. And it does all of that while delivering an experience few SRPGs deliver this day. I might want to take a break from it for now, but I wouldn't have played 30 hours if the game sucked. Okay, I did play 35 hours of Far Cry 6, and that game sucked, but that one was a Skinner box, okay? This one is different. Codename Bakery is true Game of the Year material. If it won Game of the Year anywhere, if anyone indicated it, if it was up for a vote, I would vote on it in a heartbeat. And that's why I wanted to make this video, even if I didn't finish the game. Because this game might not have been completely for me, but I still believe it is something special and worth celebrating. And if I managed to convince at least one more person to try it out with this video, then it would have been worth it. This is Penguin Overdrive signing off, and I hope to count on your continued support in the very near future. Even if you now know that I am a dirty casual.